Welcome to Series 12, exploring the autobiographies of Joan Baez. It's Paul Medeiros coming to you today from city of New Bedford, near my residence. About 2 weeks ago, I summarized the important findings of Philosophy 225. First, that there are two modest proposals about good life. Second, that there are two candidates for the good life: intellectual life and moral life. Also, this semester, we've learned three categories of virtues which define goodness in the person, and moreover, the virtues are a useful way of distinguishing the different types of good life. To pursue further learning on the topic of human life and good life, we need to test out our concepts to see if they are useful in describing and defining different kinds of human life. And moreover, even though we've spent a great deal of time looking at both the intellectual life and the moral life, what we've produced so far are just sketches of these two types of good life. We want to further elaborate and fill out these sketches. How could we do that? One possibility is to now pursue case studies of exemplary human lives. Most of our authors have provided some useful biographical or autobiographical information. So one possible next step in our study would be to study the biographies and autobiographies of our authors. To conclude our semester, Joan Baez offers a short case study of an exemplary life. According to Joan Baez, she's lived an extraordinary life. Joan Baez also champions moral life, and she expresses the insights of women like Louisa May Alcott. And moreover, she expresses the insights of a person who is a mother, and moreover, the insights of a person who is a minority. Let's first hear some important parts of her biography, and we'll summarize our Philosophy 225 readings. And finally, let's hear the two learning objectives to guide our study. Joan Baez's biography, looking at only a few dates in her complex biography. Joan Baez was born in 1941 in Staten Island, New York. Her father's family came from Mexico, and her mother was an immigrant of Scotland. Joan Baez also has two sisters. According to her autobiographies, her early childhood was complicated by many relocations. Her family followed her father's career as a physicist to different universities throughout the world. Also, in her autobiographies, Joan Baez reports significant psychological trauma, some of it associated with public schools and having to switch from school to school. In 1956, the Baez family had settled in California, and Joan Baez, by way of the Quaker community, saw Martin Luther King for the first time in California. Also in 1956, Joan Baez formed a friendship with an older man who taught her ideas about pacifism and nonviolence. She learned about Gandhi and Henry David Thoreau. Also about this time, Joan Baez conducted her first nonviolent protest. Her public school practicing a drill for nuclear war, and Joan Baez, informed by her father about the realities of nuclear war, refused to participate in the drill. In 1958, the family relocated to Massachusetts, where her father began to work for one of the Ivy League universities, and Joan Baez enrolled in Boston University, which happens to be the school that Martin Luther King attended. Joan Baez began to explore the Cambridge culture, the cafes, and began to perform singing on the guitar, or singing with the guitar. She also dropped out of Boston University within the first semester. In 1959, Joan Baez performed at the Newport Folk Festival near Salve Regina University, and she, at that time, became well known as a valuable and important performer of folk music. From that point on, her biography becomes complex. Some important points in her story: in 1967, Joan Baez was married and also gave birth to a child. However, her husband entered prison for anti-draft activities, and in 1974, Joan Baez was officially a single mother. Let's hear two life statements from her, one from her autobiography and the second from one of her songs. This is a life statement from Daybreak, or the very conclusion of Daybreak. On page 158, my life is a crystal teardrop. There are snowflakes falling in the teardrop and little figures trudging in slow motion. If I were to look into the teardrop for the next million years, I might never figure out who the people are and what they're doing. And then here's a statement from A Song for David, which was published in 1969. Joan Baez singing, "The stars in your sky are the stars in mine, and both prisoners of this life are we." This song is a reflection upon her predicament as a young mother with her husband in prison, and her proposal there is that we can share a life despite being separate. Okay, let's now look at a summary of our readings for this week. We are looking at two autobiographies written about 20 years apart. Daybreak was published in 1968. It is a literary, creative, poetic autobiography of about 33 episodes. Some of the episodes describe life experiences. Other episodes are poems talking about her beliefs. We'll be reading the last half of the autobiography, pages 77 to 159. And as a reader, you're free to sort of pick and choose what's interesting to you. I recommend the short episode titled Window Seat, which features Joan Baez and her older male friend Ira. The episode about meditation is valuable, and there's also a philosophy dialogue titled What Would You Do If? And the dialogue explores pacifism. And then finally, toward the end, the episode titled The House describes the house in which Joan Baez now lives, and toward the end, there's a valuable statement about her view of nostalgia. The second autobiography was published in 1987, and Joan Baez tells us it required 2 years to write. In comparison with Daybreak, this is a very carefully written and detailed autobiography, roughly chronological, however also divided into episodes. We'll be looking at the preface together, which is the first 3 pages, and this is important because it provides a nice short case study of Joan Baez's extraordinary life. I've also attached chapter 6, which provides some insight into her music career. In our biographies reader is an extra reading, the biography from her website, and this is a biography prepared within the last 2 years, showing her many accomplishments. And there are 2 audio files, 2 songs by Joan Baez. The first we've quoted from, A Song for David, published in 1969, and Diamonds and Rust, a song recorded and or published in 1975. Both of these songs talk about human life, and in particular Joan Baez's life. We have 2 learning objectives for our last week of study. First learning objective, to summarize key ingredients of Joan Baez's extraordinary life. Many of these details are given in the preface. Second, to distinguish nostalgia for the past and Joan Baez's proposal to examine the past.